Right, Campbell's comments. I'm back, and I'm going to start calling this talking tactics. Try and get it done a little bit earlier in the night for the people at home. But I did it last week with Kima Frenning with Ride High, and I copped a little bit of flack from a couple of people. One, there was too much of my head on the picture, so I'll do that. That was one of the flacks I got. Jodi Quinlan, firstly, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me. I wanted to just talk tactics Saturday night. There was so much build-up in the lead-up to this race about Lochinvar and potentially what he might have done. How did you see it from where you were sitting with your horse, like prior to the race?
Yeah, look, I thought I was up against it, this task of beating Lochinvar. I mean, I've watched him very closely and Ride High and all that, and I sort of thought my horse might have been, a rung below him going into the race, but it just depends how the race panned out. But I certainly thought I could definitely run second.
You thought you could run second on the night?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to be there trackside. I'm very lucky in that sense, and I must admit, and not making this up, when he walked onto the parade ring, I went, wow. Because, man, he looked good, didn't he? He really looked the part on the night. I know Emma and Clayton have a habit of presenting their horses in really good condition and all the rest, but there was just a little bit extra about him on the night, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. He's obviously really thrived on his short break, and look, his form was phenomenal back in the regional racing. And when I actually hopped on him, he was really glowing, and he looked super.
He definitely did. Major Times, of course, we're talking about. We haven't mentioned his name. We have mentioned Lochinvar. What I'm trying to do is just short and sharp and just make it a little bit aware for people that there's a bit more goes on into a race than point and shoot and hope you can come out on top. And one of the things I found with this race the other night, I think your tactics were incredible, and there was quite a few moves that you had actually made. It wasn't a matter of just going to the death. There was quite a few times where you actually had to initiate some movements and going for it. Just at the start, now I'll just turn this around. It's a little bit hard what we do here. So Jode's just trying to see the camera shot. We're about, I suppose, 100 metres off release point here. And what was your initial thoughts when you're going up to the mobile there? Did you have a pre-planned idea of what to do?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I sort of thought, I'd spoken to Clayton before the race and Emma, and we sort of thought if we could keep underneath Lochinvar and keep ahead of him, that would be an advantage for my horse. So sort of thought early, I followed out a horse, better be the bomb that had nice gate speed, and I sort of thought he might have been able to steer across and I tracked him through, but it didn't sort of pan out that way at that stage.
Before I roll the tape, does it help having a horse like Mr. Wickham, who's first up? He presented beautifully on the night, but he definitely looked like he needed 2 or 3 runs that you knew he wouldn't be jostling in underneath it. Does that make it a little bit easier with your tactics?
Yes and no. I mean, to be honest, like you can have all the great plans around, and when that gate goes, everything changes, and that's when you've got to make split decisions at the time. And sometimes they're the right ones, and sometimes they're the wrong ones. So you're either a genius or a dill. So I just think when the gate goes, everything changes, and that's where your part comes in as a driver. You've got to try and make the right decisions.
Absolutely, and we've just got the tape rolling now, and the mobile goes. It looked like Dave Moran had the same intention. He's even actually pulled the stick there to make sure that try and get ahead of you early on, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of thought that going up to the gate and just on dispatch that Dave had the same sort of plan. Obviously, he thought if he could keep ahead of me, it was all over. Just at that point where you stopped, it started a little tight. I had Kiwi Mate underneath me, and I was sort Dave was quite tight on me. And as they were shuffling up in front of me, obviously Better Be the Bomb was getting down into the rain line, but I still had Kiwi Mate inside of me. So sort of just had to sort of hold me line a little bit, and as they sort of went a little bit further on, I was able to get in ahead of Kiwi Mate at that stage. Otherwise, it would have been left pretty deep.
Absolutely, and I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble with stopping it here, but the reason I did stop it here is you've elected to take that sit instead of kicking up under Dave Morena. Even though it is tight, you certainly could have kept kicking up, but you chose to pull out of this early speed battle at that stage.
Yeah, look, I thought we were going fairly quick at that point, and my bloke sort of was off the bit a little bit without me chasing him. So I just thought, you know what, he's always sort of had the advantage of covering me half length outside me, so I'm just going to try and drop in here, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Dave still had to do his fair share of work, but you weren't, I mean, you've got to then hold up, like right here, you're holding up under Dave again and driving him pretty solid. I mean, to continue to keep Dave out 3 deep. And then Dave now looks like he's going to go to the front and the rest. But you've sort of had a little bit of a breather, but it's not like you've had a huge breather. Effectively, the only breather you had over Lochinvar Art was your one cart further in. That's about it, wasn't it?
Yeah, and look, I mean, not often I drive through from the second row, especially when they're coming from 3 and 4 wide on the second row, because you take that chance of just getting caught there. But just thought at the time that we had to sort of chance our arm and do that, because you are working quite harder than it actually looked. But I knew by the speed we were going that I was doing enough work to hold my spot and get into the running line, and I didn't want to leave the gap ahead of me, so I had to sort of be cautious that I kept up on the back of, reasonably on the back of the one in front of me, so Lochinvar didn't happen to jump in front of me. So I was still doing a little bit of work, but it was off the track, and then when it proceeded forward, we were really running at that point in time.
Yeah, and I'll roll it now, and you get a little breather. As I said, you probably had a breather for 100 metres prior to me stopping that. Then better the BB, the bomb actually went the fence, which was probably fortunate for you. If it had have gone when Lochinvar Art was outside, he may have dropped in front of you. So you've given him plenty of room. You're not scrubbing him up now. You're actually giving him plenty of time just to catch his breath.
Yeah, exactly right. I sort of... It's one thing my Uncle Jeff taught me when I was learning to drive. Like, he sort of would watch trials and things with me and say to me, if they haven't got the natural speed to keep up, don't chase them, don't run them off their legs, because it does take its toll. And I think that's something smart that he sort of did teach me. So once Lochinvar had got to the front, I didn't need to bother to continue chasing mine forward to hold the back of the one in front of me. So I just let him take his time until he gained his momentum, and he sort of got to the back of that horse in front of me, and then when I got there and David got to the front, obviously he was looking for a breather, so when he sort of grabbed hold, that's when I proceeded to go round.
Which is basically right here where I've stopped it. Darby McGuigan's actually looking for cover. You can tell we've actually caught his head at the right time. He's hoping someone's coming. I think he'd be hoping that it was you. And this is one of the key moments, I think, because you waited well and truly into the straight and waited till the speed completely came out of it. Instead of expecting the speed to come out of it, you actually waited for that speed to completely wash out, and then elected to just quickly skip around Darby's horse very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, it may not, as you said earlier, it may not have looked like that I was chasing, but by the feel on the horse, I still did chase a little bit myself early to get to where I did, and I sort of sat there for a bit just to try and give him that little extra bit of breather until the pace come out of it. And as you said, I sort of just strode around. I always knew the breather was going to be there, so I wasn't going to have to work overtime to get there at that point. And I think that's probably nearly what won the race.
Yeah, so they get going down the back, and Dave's got his main danger, I feel, probably on paper anyway, his main danger outside of him, and he's not flying along. He's definitely not chasing it and not going for home. He's having a good look over his shoulder right there because he's obviously fairly confident. And this here, in a minute, it's about the stage where I think from your point of view, you had to make a big tactic. You really got up your bloke to get going, probably trying not to let Dave get away with it. But right about here, once you get to him, do you think to yourself, do I keep going now? Because you've got to him pretty quickly, or like, what is your thinking right at this stage, Joe? Do you just keep going and hope you can get past him?
Yeah, well, look, just a little bit earlier than that, sort of when I strode up outside him, I sort of seen Dave sort of feel for his horse a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I just got to go for home now because he'd done the work, and it was going to be the last man standing, whoever was the strongest, that the sort of the early speed battle would take its toll on. So at that point, look, my horse was quite sour, so once I'd gone that far and seemed to have Lochinvar off the bit, I just kept going and hoped that I could A, stick with him, and B, get past him.
So it's interesting you say that because clearly your arms are lifted, you're driving him along pretty solid. Dave appears to be just sitting there. When you said Dave felt for him, what for the punters at home? What did you witness that he did?
Yeah, look, when you're outside of them and that, you can see with the hole in their range and things, and when the length of the range sort of, you ask them to go forward, you give them a little bit of rein, and I sort of sensed that sort of about the 500 that he sort of was niggling without, really, really going for him, and then when he pulled the plug with his foot, generally you sort of you're asking for full steam at that stage. And when I was with him and matching it with him at that time, I thought, we're really in it with a good show because he is under pressure.
And then he doesn't go away. I mean, it's been well reported that he hasn't pulled up 100% like Ballarat, but he's still there with you. Dave's keeping him with you. You just got to keep driving this big bloke, but he keeps going to the line. At what point did you think you've got the race won?
Well, look, to be honest, I thought I had Dave covered turning for home. My bloke keeps going, and a couple of people said to me about my whip in the right hand. Did I get in trouble? And I said, no, actually, I didn't hit him very much at all. My whip was actually in the left hand, and I was hitting him with my right hand with the reins. He's a stallion, and he doesn't like it, cop a lot of whip, but the more you rein him and sort of urge him along, what I've found in the past riding him, he just keeps going. And if you can encourage him without hitting him with the stick and sort of rein him and roar at him, that sort of thing, he does seem to find and he does lift. My main worry, I could feel a horse coming very quickly, sort of in the straight as we got into the straight a little bit, and I thought, I wonder if that is Kiwi Mate. And you see me have a little look across, and when I seen it was him, he's very quick. He can really sprint a quick sort of 300 or 400 quite quickly, and I thought, yeah, well, here's a chance. It just whether me having a spell to run a tail on my horse or not. But when Kiwi was coming and he sort of got to me, I thought I was a little chance of holding him off.
You're more than a little chance, Jode. You're a huge chance, and I hope the punters at home have appreciated what goes in. But there was a lot more thinking in that race, wasn't it, than just basically get around outside of Lochinvar and hope you can hold on. Yeah,
sure. I mean, before the race, if you said to me, do you want to be outside Lochinvar, I'd say, hell no. That would be the last place I'd want to be. But that just shows you how racing changes complex quite quickly. A lot depends, what's inside you early, what speed they're going early, and it completely changes, the aspect of the race. But, to my advantage, obviously Dave's horse wasn't 100%, but you'd be surprised. I think you'd find that it's ran a fair old quarter getting around from hunting through from the second row, and by the time it got to the front, I felt that I'd done a little bit of chasing. It did a hell of a lot more than what I did. So I think, if you put the clock on, I'm tipping it would have ran nearly a quarter to get around there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing that I like what you did do is 500 from home, used that part to your advantage, that you hadn't gone as hard as what he had early to make it a staying test. If you had a sat back off him, potentially, you don't know, Dave might have got another soft quarter down the back and then zipped home and no one would be any the wiser that things aren't quite kosher with the horse afterwards.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, you just got to drive the race as it presents at the time and know my bloke, he's fairly dour and sort of Clayton said that, he's fairly on his game. And he did say to me, don't be frightened to stick it to it, around the corners and things like that. And I was sort of mindful of that. I sort of thought maybe when Dave saw straight and it might have surged a little bit in the straight because he can do that. So I just had to go with him and stick with him as much as I could and just keep urging mine as I did. And on the night, he was better one of the two on that night.
Absolutely. Jodi Quinlan, thank you very much for joining me. This is, as I said, Talking Tactics. Need a sponsor. I've got a couple of banners to go up, but I couldn't get them up. I have a little bit too much on my plate, so maybe one of my sponsors want to get involved. We might continue doing them, but definitely while COVID-19's on, and we can do it through the phone. It's not quite kosher. It'd be lovely to be able to sit down in a room with a big TV and be able to talk it a bit easier. But, Jode, thank you very much for your time. And you're having a great run. You're having a good run with the Emma Stewart and Clayton Tonkin runners. That's for sure. It's a really good time for you at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, when I come back from that accident I had and that, I never thought that I would be doing what I'm doing right now, and probably COVID sort of played into my hands a little bit because I was fortunate to pick some of Clayton's drives up at Melton, and from there I drove quite a few winners for him, and they've thrown me a bone here and there, and it's just panned out. I mean, when you're driving for a big stable like that, I mean, they're the leading trainers, and it always helps when you're driving their horses.
Absolutely, and for anyone at home that's watching this, best combination going around in harness racing at the minute is Jodi Quinlan and My Better Lady. I just love it. Just two diminutive little females that pack a power of punch, I must say. I think you guys should be the flagship of harness racing, that's for sure. Woodlands will be happy with that, two little betters delight, Philly. But, Jode, thank you very much for your time, and well done, and keep steering winners, doll.
We'll do our best. Thanks very much for having me.